Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Tieedi Forest Garden. This is our second live session on Instagram, and this time we're talking about the secrets of plastic and in fact the dirty secrets of plastic. And we'll also be talking about how do we make and use Ecobricks and what are the different alternatives of plastic. So where we are standing right now, we call this tree the giving tree or the tree of life in Tieedi. This is in fact the location where it all started for us, our entire journey in waste management. And also, so we'll start with telling you guys as to how the whole thing started for us. There was one day when, along with one of our volunteers, we were working on this particular patch. We initially had cleaned up the patch to plant some trees around, and we didn't quite anticipate. We knew that there would be some amount of trash here because this land was abandoned for about 25 years. But we didn't really quite anticipate the amount of trash that we would encounter. So just on a whim, we went up to investigate why this tree had fallen down. So the roots were upturned, and once we started digging inside the roots of the tree, we went down 3 feet under. That's when we realized that the roots of the tree was completely gagged with plastic. So it was a very, very numbing as well as a very surreal moment for us. And so that's when we realized how bad the problem is. I mean, so what we see around us in terms of the litter is nothing compared to what is underneath us or what is in the oceans. So then Jimmy, in fact, came down here. So he was a volunteer from Australia. He came down here, and just where Saurav is standing right now, he stood and then he looked up, and so just this probably about 10 meters patch that you see. So he said that till the time I'm in Tieedi, I will go ahead and clean up this entire patch, and that's when I'll leave from here. So we thought, okay, it's a 10-meter patch. We see a lot of trash around, and we thought, okay, it'll probably take him a couple of days to clean up the entire patch. So it took him actually 14 days, working almost like about 5 to 6 hours every day, and he managed to literally unearth 35 sacks of plastic from this particular portion. So what you see here is a land that's already reforested. So just in this patch we probably have about 10-12 trees. You have an avocado here, you have a bokitumbur, or what we call a Szechuan pepper, you have a mulberry, you have a tree tomato, a tamarillo, and then you have some alder trees around. Just so those are the nitrogen fixing trees for us. So when we got into it, that's when you realize that this is a major problem. So if you are looking to kind of build a forest here, we'd also have to look at solving the problem of waste around us. Okay, so as we take the walk around, let's talk a little more about plastic and where did it come from. So what are the other dirty secrets of plastic? It's kind of drizzling too. So come, let's take a walk around. So if you're part of the session last time, you would have seen us take you through this natural pathway. So we're walking down this natural pathway. It's in a way it's a beautiful day. It's drizzling slightly. So and like you said last time round, why we had taken this pathway to be a natural pathway, not getting any cement or concrete out here, is to ensure that there is water harvesting that is done naturally. So in fact, during this time of the year, this is what you get to see also. So these are the mushrooms that's popping up in the forest because of the soil that's become rich now with mycelium fungi. And so that's an indicator as to how good the forest soil is. So you'll see lots of it popping up in our forest. You guys can keep typing in the questions, and we'll continue to answer it. We have Vishal probably who will be answering it in your chat. You will see his ID as "May the forest be with you." Oh, so these guys are here. As usual, they are jamming up. Hi, Minal.
Hi.
Hi, Vishal. Hey. So that's the air dwelling, and what you're seeing here is our upcoming Zomsa. So that's in Ladakhi, it means a meeting place. So this would be a classroom plus like a common place for us. And so this is another natural building that we are coming up with. So Saurav, who's walking with me, you probably are not able to see him, but he's behind the phone or the camera. So Saurav, what's been your journey into natural buildings? So why natural buildings?
Very interesting question itself. Natural building, because there are a lot of ways by which you can reduce on the materials which have a huge carbon footprint. And like as viewers can see here, the bamboo that we are using is one of the fastest carbon sequestering. It has the ability of sequestering carbon fastest, basically.
How long does it take for bamboo to grow?
It takes just like 1 year for it to grow, and almost 3 years for it to get matured. And that's why we have been using like bamboo in all our different buildings and structures. And this, what you see, is a deep dwelling, which is also entirely made of natural materials, using mud, bamboo, and thatch for the roofing.
So in fact, what's interesting is sometimes we think that natural materials don't last long. So like this is a bamboo bridge. It's completely natural, and it took us probably, we changed it last a couple of months back. We changed it after 3 years. So I think the key here is understanding that everything has a lifeline, and everything does not need to last forever. It is okay for things to have a lifeline. Sometimes we tend to think that, okay, let's get something that would last us probably forever or a long time. So probably that's the reason why plastic has also gotten into prominence, because it gives you that feeling for material immortality, where you tend to think that, okay, if I bought this thing in plastic, because plastic does not really biodegrade, so it kind of lasts forever. So I think it is okay. The first thing I think in our head, it is okay to accept the fact that let things go back into nature, and because that also gives you an opportunity to come up with something new. So this is the earthy dwelling that we have, and the first natural building that we built here. And as you see, the benefits of natural building as opposed to any other building is that it breathes along with you. So when you're staying in a mud house like this, made up of stones, bamboo, grass, mud, clay, so what it does is it purifies your air while you are living in the house. So that means your immunity is strong, because what you are breathing into what's keeping you alive, the air that you're breathing, is always very fresh. And also the plain aesthetics of it. You don't really need any toxic colors to kind of make you feel bright. It just, you might feel that, okay, there are no colors. You can also add natural colors, but here we haven't yet really started with natural colors. But you can see that even without colors, just soaking into the essence of nature, you can enjoy the surroundings, or you can kind of feel that this particular unit is there as part of the forest. So imagine, let's say, a cemented structure here, or something that is not a natural material. It would stand out. But in nature, things don't really stand out. In nature, things actually blend in. Okay, so coming back to the main topic with regards to the plastic story, if you look at it and try and understand why plastic came into prominence, because it's just been about, I would say, about 70, 80 years that plastic has gotten into prominence. In India, I would say about 30 years. I think when, especially after World War II, when people started getting back into the consumerist economic mode, where you kind of have an economic system that is completely made up of people buying more stuff to kind of let's keep walking up. It's drizzling slightly, so And also the whole fossil fuel industry started to kind of produce a lot of petroleum and petroleum based products. They had this waste byproduct that initially they did not have a use for, but that's when they realized that, okay, maybe we can put it to use, maybe we can create a material, okay, that can be used for other purposes. So it came out as plastic. So it's actually a waste byproduct of the fossil fuel or the petroleum industry. So these are how our dustbins are, in fact, in the forest. So this is an eco-brick. We'll talk about more about this. So we put all the plastic waste, any non-biodegradable waste in the eco-bricks. And if you look at plastic now, if you categorize them, there are 7 different categories that you can broadly classify them. And you'll find them marked in any plastic item that you have. We'll show you a few of them. So it starts off with a PET bottle or a PET material, so PET, and then so it'll be marked with 1, and then similarly you have HDP, which will be marked with 2. So that's our passion fruit vine that we planted 2 years ago. You can see that it's become, it gave us like 2 passion fruits last time, so hopefully this time it's grown quite a bit. So I think we'll have lots of passion fruit this time. So Vishal here is playing, I think, the Tieedi song. That translates into listen to the river that's flowing, gushing down. Salalala. The insects are going kararara. The river is going salalala. In between Darjeeling and Kashiong, there's this place called Tieedi. Kararara. Kararara. So that's Kararara. So if the let us know what are the problems that you have in life. Have you tried saying Tieedi, which would stand for take it easy, easy does it? Salalala, kararara, salalala, kararara, salalala, kararara, salalala, kararara.
Let's go.
All right, so where's Abhishek and Ankita? Let's go check them out. I think they seem to be missing from the scene, huh?
I think they are in the air dwelling.
Okay, what are these guys doing inside, huh?
Hey,
Hi.
what are you doing? Where you got all this garbage from?
These are all at the packs of chips, biscuits, and Maggie you have been eating since the lockdown had started.
Really?
Yes.
So much?
Yeah, so much. And you know what? Guess what I'm doing?
What?
I'm making Ecobreaks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. So,
And do you see this?
yeah.
Yes.
I told you not to go out in the lockdown.
I didn't go out.
So where you got this from?
I made it.
Really?
Yes. Also the one which you are sitting on
Yeah.
is the table I made of Ecobreaks.
Really?
Yeah. And there are
Oh.
around 18 Ecobricks can go into one small table.
This looks nice.
Yeah, it is nice. But you know what? I have some doubts
Yeah.
what to do with the Tetra Packs and the cigarette packets. Utsav, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there.
Also will tell you about that.
Yeah. So we have an expert
Hi guys.
here. Utsav,
Yeah.
so I'm making Ecobricks.
Okay.
Everything is going well,
Mhm.
but I don't know some of the parts, like where does this go? Can I put it into my Ecobrick?
Okay, can I have a look at that? So,
Yeah, it's
So-
a tea.
so
we
it's a-
use it just to have
what's
tea.
usually known as a paper cup, but it's not really a paper cup. Okay, it's got a thin film of plastic inside, and unfortunately you can't compost it. It can't go into your compost bin. Okay, so this is a sort of plastic that what we call a mixed plastic, which is very, very difficult to manage when you have different materials trying to come together. Okay, so
And we have the cigarette packets also.
and,
you can have a look of all the trash we have.
okay, yeah. So this again is a mixed material where we have cardboard and plastic mixed into it. So these are things that makes it difficult for you to kind of recycle your waste, compost your waste, and similarly you have different kinds of waste that is there, which we'll talk about. So this is what we call a Tetra Pack. Okay, again, very, very difficult to recycle, even though there are few companies which is looking to set up just Tetra Pack recycling units. But when you look at it, they're hardly present, especially in rural India, and also the fact that the collection is a big issue here. So mostly it's dumped along with other kinds of waste. So what happens when you dump it in soil? The biodegradable layer starts kind of coming out, and then you have the plastic layer that remains behind, and this also has metal, so which kind of goes into the soil and starts creating problems there. So similarly, I think it's important for us to understand first what are the different kinds of material and how do you define different kinds of plastic. So as I was talking earlier, you have plastic broadly classified into 7 different categories. The first one being PET, okay, so which is polyethylene tetraethylene. But if you look at PET, you would be able to distinguish it by the symbol that is there. So every plastic that is there will have a symbol. So for instance, let's look at this. So this, you see, if you can see the screen, so this is like, you'll see the 3 arrows, and then you will see the number 2. So this is HDPE, or high density polyethylene. But so this is again a different kinds of plastic. So this is usually made to be hard plastic. So similarly, you have the other kind of plastic. So if you see, this is number 3. Okay, and this is number 7. Okay, so number 7 is usually the kind of plastic that what people generally call polycarbonate, which is used to make, like, let's say, covers of different materials. So that's a cover of a Wi-Fi router, and you have your food being packaged in this. So this is a plastic that has got the number 5. Okay, so similarly, I won't go deep into the details because you guys already have this information lying online. Just search for different grades of plastic. So broadly, you have these 7 grades of plastic that is there. But interestingly, when you start getting into the recycling industry, you have about 83 different categories defined by the recyclers. And that's one part of it. Second part of it, now, if this particular plastic goes to a recycler and there is food material in it, it's contaminated with food and it's not clean, it does not get recycled, right? And also the fact that there's huge amount of energy that's wasted if someone takes this to be cleaned and then presents it for the recycler to kind of recycle. Because recycling, if you look at it, is actually a misnomer. What generally happens is that it gets downcycled. So for instance, your PET bottle, or the number 1 bottle, or the one in which you have your water bottles and all of that, does not really get recycled. Okay, it gets downcycled. So what we mean by getting downcycled is that your water bottle, once it goes into the recycling industry, does not really come back as a water bottle. It comes back as a t-shirt, okay, or it comes back in other materials that has been downcycled. So recycling is actually a misnomer. It does not get recycled. It rather gets downcycled. So the first step that we need to do in case of plastic that we need to understand is that you need to remember 3 R's. Okay, the first thing is to refuse. Okay, so when you refuse, you are stopping plastic from coming into your life. So when you're buying something, you're trying to look at something that is packaged naturally, something that is biodegradable, okay, and something that does not have any plastic into it. So the first step is always to reduce. So it starts from refusing it. So the next thing is reusing whatever that we have. Okay, so and why reuse before recycle is because if you look at a recycling industry also, it also has a carbon footprint, because if a certain thing has to go into a machine and the machine has to run again through a fossil fuel, it will be adding into the carbon footprint. So that means it will be using up certain amount of the non-renewable energy that we have, right, to kind of create a product, even if it's a downcycled product. Now, similarly, if you look at it, the whole industry that is there has kind of taken us for a ride, because we tend to think that there are certain materials that's come in as a replacement, which is a very interesting thing, because we are made to feel that we are choosing for a much more environmentally friendly option, but we aren't. So what's happening here, if you look at it, in the plastic argument, usually you talk about plastic bags. We think plastic bags is the only problem. So when you're talking about bans, what gets the entire focus is ban on plastic bags, right? But even in plastic bags, right, when the plastic bags are banned, what generally comes across is something like this. You're made to feel that it's a cloth bag. Okay, so if you see something like this, it is not a cloth bag. Okay, this is called a non-woven polypropylene. Okay, now this is made to feel like a cloth bag, but it's even more worse, because this breaks down very easily, breaks down into microplastic, starts contaminating your water, starts contaminating your soil. Okay, so this is not an alternative to this, right? So similarly, in terms of our cleanup exercise that we've noticed, the other thing that we find prominent are these Gutka packets, which is again mixed plastic, mixed with some amount of aluminum foil, which we will come to in terms of what these generally denote. Now these, so if you look at it, what Ankita was stuffing into that particular bottle was something like that. Okay, so any plastic that you see, okay, that is very colorful, which is basically they're playing with the psychology to kind of make us buy a lot of these junk stuff, and they have silver inside, so they are invariably made out of a multi-layered plastic is what you call it. Okay, this cannot go back into a recycling or even a downcycling industry. This does not have any value. Now, there is some talk about this being used in construction of roads, where it's mixed with bitumen or tar, because both have the same base element as petroleum. But I think instinctively, or I think if you ask the question, what happens when the road breaks down? Because if this is plastic and you're melting it and you're kind of merging it with bitumen or tar to make the roads, what happens when the road breaks down? It has to go into either the soil or the water, right? So that's the question that still is unanswered in that particular solution that's been brought forward or touted as a solution even by the Indian government and probably lots of people across the world. So this does not have, there is no way that you can call this a circular in the economy product. This is a very, very badly designed linear product that does not have any value, all of these MLPs. So if you look at it, so what do we do, right? How do we get over the scourge of plastic? And if we are supposed to give it to our local, what we call in India, the kabadi wallas, or the people who are part of this informal sector, where they come in, take our, let's say, glass bottles, paper, and take it for recycling. They take some amount of plastic, right? So even though these are industry standards that's defined, because it's a very informal sector, you will have to check locally with your local kabadi wala and check with them saying what kinds of plastic that they take. So sometimes they take all the HDPs that we saw. They take sometimes the bottles also. Sometimes they take these guys also. Okay, but it varies across. So I think you will have to check what can be taken back into the industry to be downcycled. But if you look at it, in our research, what we realized was 10 to 20% of all the plastic that you use is actually MLPs, or multi-layered plastic, right? So we know for sure now that multi-level plastic cannot be recycled. So what do we do, right? So Ankita was talking about an Ecobrick, and some of you must have seen the video of Minal stuffing MLPs into a plastic bottle like this, right, using a stick. So when we initially thought, how can a problem that's so complicated have a solution that's so simple, right? So first of all, this is not a solution. There is no solution for MLPs right now. Let's be very clear about that. This is a compromise. And this is what we found as the best compromise that we can do, where you lock in the plastic in a bottle. Okay. Now, why lock in? Is because, like we saw earlier in by the Tree of Life, where if it goes into the soil, and a lot of the plastic goes into the soil, because in a forest like this or anywhere that has got green cover, you will see that nature does an excellent job of hiding our folly. Where if you see, at least on the road, you will see the plastic there, very prominent. But in a place that's got some amount of green cover, if your plastic falls down, nature will try and hide a folly, where you'll have leaves falling on top of it. You'll have another set of leaves falling on top of it. Come back after like a few years, you'll have the plastic go underneath, 3 feet under, and it still exists. So that's what we realized in the Tree of Life. How it got down, how it was brought down is all the plastic came together, it created an impermeable layer, and then the roots could not move any further. So plastic is one of the biggest reasons why we are having landslides in Darjeeling during the monsoon, because there is this impermeable layer of probably now about millions and millions of plastic that is lying there. And because it does not biodegrade, probably it takes about 500 to 1,000 years for it to biodegrade, it remains there, right? So if you look at Ecobreaks, there are a number of things that you can do. So firstly, a few things that you have to keep in mind is that you take your plastic, clean it. Okay, so clean it, ensure that it's clean, and you dry it. Okay, ensure that your plastic is absolutely dry when you stuff it in. Okay, it's clean. Okay, and then you stuff it really, really tight. Okay, so if you've seen that video where Minal was stuffing into it, he probably stuffed close to about 300 grams of plastic there. And if you need a sort of like a base to calculate or something to go by, just calculate it as per that every liter of a container that you have has to have at least 33 grams of plastic going into it. Okay, so that means a 1 liter bottle has to have a minimum of 330 grams of plastic. So that is where it becomes sturdy. Okay, and that's when this particular thing that was a problem, and like we say in permaculture, it becomes a solution. So the problem has become a solution, because now what earlier was an extremely badly designed material that couldn't be used for anything else, you made it into a brick. Now this brick, let's see what all it can be used for. So what Ankita has done here is she's gotten about, that was how many? About 18? 19. Yeah. 19. So for 19 bottles, so that means each bottle, let's say on an average, we have about 300. So that gives us how much, Abhishek? So he's pretty good in maths. I'm sorry, I'm not too good. So
a lot of plastic.
That's a huge amount of plastic. Okay, so I would bet that in your household, if you start eco-bricking, a family of 4 can stuff the entire plastic waste into one bottle, the entire plastic waste of 1 week in one bottle. Okay, so this particular stool that you see here is made using all old clothes, stuff that we've kind of foraged from our materials recovery facility that we have in Tieedi, and it's all upcycled, right? And it's pretty comfortable to sit on, and you can kind of create this, and you can create something like this too, where we've used a old tire that you can see, and again old bed sheets, old clothes, and so this is how the structure looks like. So this is like a hexagon structure where you again have about 18-20 bricks, and you give it a structure, and you can play around with it. There are again a number of models that you can try looking at it online, but this is just an example of what you can do. You can create a bookshelf. I think this is something that the guys were doing the other day. Oops. So something like that can be created, and also you can make it look pretty. So I think if you go out here, so this is the balcony that we have. So this is a combination of using empty bottles, plastic eco-bricks, and making planters. So yeah, so we are actually in between the trees right now. So this is a wild olive tree, or in Nepali we call it batrase. So I think in another year or two, once the branches grow, we can probably just reach out and pluck out some wild olives from here. All right, so this time around, we have set aside some time to take in your questions too. So before that, let me just talk about some more about plastic eco-bricks, the precautions that you need to use. When you use it, just ensure that you kind of keep it away when you're storing it or using it, that it's away from direct sunlight. Okay, that's one thing. Also, ensure that you use something to cover it up. Even if you don't cover it up, at least ensure that it's away from direct sunlight, it's away from like a constant source of water, right? And you can get creative with it. You can kind of create different structures using different combination of bricks. Someone had a question with regards to the health hazard. It is inert. So basically we also call it a 1,000-year brick. As long as it does not react with sun or water, okay, it's there. And it is as good as having, like, let's say, an empty bottle by your side. Okay, so there is there is no health hazard that has come about that you need to be worried about. There is something called a global Ecobricks Alliance, and the website is ecobricks.org. You'll have like plethora of information there. You guys can go in, log in. Someone also had a question saying, what do we do with Ecobricks if we are not much into DIYs? You can actually register yourself. There are people who are using Ecobricks for construction. Like for us, we have tied up with a lot of partners here, and when we're doing construction, we started using Ecobricks, especially let's say we are constructing compost toilets. And so if you have to construct a wall like this, okay, so the entire wall, so this is like a cob wall, but if you have to make the entire wall using Ecobricks, so let's take a guess, guys. So you guys can type in how many bricks do you think would be used to calculate or to construct a wall like this?
Until then, Ratna has a question. How do I stuff it this much? I don't think I'm stuffing enough to make it stable.
Okay, so one way to stuff it would be that
It's there next to the
so when you stuff it, just ensure that the bottom is really tight, because sometimes what we do is we add plastic till the top, and then it gets difficult to stuff. But if you stuff it, the bottom has to be really, really tight. So take it in and ensure that it's all crushed into the bottom before you put any more plastic. So this portion, the bottom, I would say the 25%, if your base is really, really tight, you'd be able to stuff more, right? And once you have more plastic, if you feel that this is taking in, like getting difficult to stuff in once you have more plastic, what you can do is use gravity to your advantage. So this is one way that we found it's easier to stuff, okay, because plastic won't come out because the hole is small, so you can keep stuffing it in like that. And the other way that you can do is, once to test an Ecobreak, is that, do we have one that's stuffed here, guys?
It's there.
Yeah, so one way to test it is that you should be able to stand on it without it getting crushed, okay? So this is not getting crushed. So that means this is a pretty sturdy Ecobrick. So I would say this is close to about 300. You can actually go up. We've gone up to about 700. And I think, Minal, what's the record?
905.
905 grams of plastic that he stuffed in here. Okay, so yeah, he takes it very, very personally. That's his record. He does not want anyone to break his record. So yeah, you can stuff in a lot of plastic. So imagine like even half a kg of plastic. Inside this is a huge amount of plastic. We'd also recommend you to watch the video that we put up in the morning, where we wanted to give you guys the scale of the amount of plastic that you can see that can be stuffed. So you'll be able to see Minal stuffing it in. So that's the amount of plastic that can go in. Make the base really tight, keep stuffing it in. As and when you stuff more, ensure that you stuff it really, really tight. Try and get a stick. If you don't have one, you can use what we call firni in Hindi, or that's something that you use in Indian kitchens to kind of turn the dal. So that's something that Minal was using yesterday. So similarly, let's look at some other creations that's here. So that's another model that's there. So it's, you've used ropes and other ropes, that's the jute ropes and other plastic rope that's been recycled from a packaging material that's come in. So this can be like a small stool. Okay, so this can be something that you kind of use, combine it. You can have a table around, and you can have a circular table here, and then the whole thing goes around, right? So if you happen to create anything, if you happen to get anything made out of it, please do tag us. And
so,
okay.
There are suggestions from people like in the wall answer. Anish Pradhan is saying 1500 bricks. Devash is saying 300. And Ossipali is saying 3000 bottles can go.
Okay. So when we did a quick calculation, we made our compost toilet using Ecobricks. So it was about this size. So this is probably 1/8 of the whole thing. And we used close to about, I think, 80 bottles in the whole thing. So that means about close to about 640 bottles would go in here. So if you're looking at this particular wall, if you have to do with Ecobricks, okay, that means 640, and in each bottle you have about 100 of chips packets going in. So that's quite a lot. Okay, so that's close to about 64,000 packets of plastic, which would probably fill up the entire room going into a particular wall that's getting locked in there, right? So the idea is to contain that particular plastic, and that's the reason why we also call it a 1,000-year break, because it almost lasts forever. Plastic does not decompose now, right? And you're using its property, which is kind of given it a lot of a bad name because it does not decompose, to its advantage, where you're using it to construct something. And so we would say get creative with it, like Ankita has done here. She has made it look very, very pretty. So, and so we call it the lockdown talent in terms of a lot of this that has come out is, yes, because you are, let's say, sitting at home, and you can kind of start off with eco-bricking, and then you can go ahead and start getting creative with what you can do, right? So
one more question. How can plastic be end product of fossils? Aren't fossil fuels themselves biodegradable? Confused.
Okay, fossil fuels themselves, it depends upon how you're looking at it. Ultimately, there is no such thing as chemical is bad or chemical is good, right? So everything is a natural product. You have like even a chemical that can be produced in the laboratory and chemical that has come out from the ground. So petroleum is something that is, surprisingly, you can call it a natural product. But how we use it is the problem. So what we've done is we've taken this byproduct or a waste byproduct from the fossil fuel industry, and we've converted that into a sort of like a combination that makes it extremely difficult to go back into nature. It's not that it won't go back, it just takes like tremendously long time. So that's why because of the length of time for it to kind of biodegrade is why we call it non-biodegradable. So till the time it starts leaching out stuff into the soil and water, that is harmful. So what generally happens, let's say, is if it does not become food into nature's cycle, then it becomes toxic for certain material. So like, let's say there is a straw. Now, let's say, for instance, it takes about 700 years for it to biodegrade. It goes into the water. Now it's food. It's not food for any of the animals that's there or the fishes that's there. So it goes, and then you might have seen a video of the straw getting up a turtle's nostril and getting stuck there. So that's where it starts causing damage. So that's where the toxicity of plastic comes into the picture.
There's one more question. Why is it required to clean the plastic before stuffing inside?
Okay, that's a good question. So I think, again, if you look at it, in nature, how everything has been beautifully designed is that it's a circular system, right? So if you do not clean, and if there are food particles there, or if there is some amount of soil that is there in Ecobrick, it starts reacting, right? Because it starts getting into a process where there is microbial activity that happens, okay? And there is probably some amount of gas that might get generated, okay? So that's one. And so that will ensure that it starts kind of bloating up, okay? And the other thing that might happen is it might attract rodents if there is food inside. We've noticed plastic ecobricks where I think we've got so this is like an excellent example where, so this is like oil packet, and we saw a ecobrick that we had gotten here that had been chewed from the bottom. So we were curious as to how is it that particular ecobrick had been chewed from the bottom. So apparently it's been attacked by the rodents. So that's when you realize that someone had stuffed the oil packets without really cleaning off the oil and drying it. So that somehow has attracted the rodents to kind of get into it, thinking that there is some amount of food for them inside, right? So you wouldn't want anything to kind of react in that particular bottle. You wouldn't want anything to attract any animals or insect to that particular bottle, thinking there is something that is a food source for them there.
So, currently there are many alternatives going on, like making fuels from plastic, making roads, etc. Is it really eco-friendly?
So there are lots of work that's going on into this, right? And I'll tell you about my own journey. So we wanted to kind of know more about how this whole thing works. So I happened to visit Trivandrum in Kerala, which follows a decentralized waste management system where everyone is mandatory. It's mandatory to compost at home, and then your plastic goes into something called an MRF. It's collected, and it goes into an MRF facility where the plastic is taken, collected. So I visited that MRF, and I was curious to know what happens to all the plastic that is there. So different grades of plastic, like I said, has different values. So one grade of plastic that is there is the white plastic, which generally has a higher value. So they were getting close to about 25 rupees per kg in that recycling facility for recycling that particular grade of plastic, the white plastic. MLP, right? So there was this whole stack of multi-layered plastic that was outside that particular facility. So I asked the person in charge, saying that, okay, why isn't this going back into the industry? So that's when they said that even though it's been mandated for them to use it for road construction, and you use it for, let's say, as a co-processing material while making roads, it's difficult for them to implement it. So that's why the contractors have stopped taking it. So there is this whole pile. And then the ultimate question is, where does all the MLP go if it gets collected? If there is a major cleanup that's happening, where does all of that go? In India, I would say if it's getting collected, So I'll tell you the stats as to how much is the collection that happens. If it's getting collected, it is going back. Okay, now it's not going back. So when you say it's getting converted into a fuel, it's going back as a co-processing fuel. That means you're using it in cement factories or cement kilns to burn the materials to make the cement. Now, what happens when you burn plastic, right? Where it seems like a very easy solution. When you burn, let it burn. I mean, because then it goes out of sight. But I think the analogy that we need to understand here is, if plastic is an enemy that you're trying to fight against, and let's say as long as you see that particular enemy and then you know that, okay, it's there, it's bad, we got to take care of it, it's lying on the road, or we got to somehow, either through eco-breaking or through some other material or through some other exercise, we got to take care of it. You see it. What if you don't see your enemy? What if it becomes invisible? Okay, so that's what happens when you burn plastic. You're making your enemy invisible. Also, apart from that, it becomes even more powerful, because from being into a solid state, once it goes into a gaseous state, it releases this chemicals called dioxins and furans, which is extremely harmful to our health. It causes hormonal disruption, it is carcinogenic, and we breathe that in. Okay, and that's one of the reasons why you see a lot of pollution. Pollution in the air is not just due to vehicular pollution. Pollution in the air is a lot to do with plastic waste getting burned. So when you look at Delhi, which is sometimes has probably about 20 times the recommended levels of air quality index, there is a waste unit in Okhla which burns 2,000 tons of waste, mixed waste, every single day. Okay, and there is a colony, I think, if I remember the name correctly, it's called Devpuria, which is where people stay just next to that particular center where the incinerator is. The number of cases of people having respiratory disorders has gone up like in a very huge way, right? So you'll see more of the stats if you go check out this documentary called, which is recently launched on Earth Day. It's called The Story of Plastic. Okay, and see if you can get to the online screening, or if you can watch it online. It gives you a lot of these kind of details. The other interesting stat that has come out from the World Economic Forum, which has done research as to the whole world, the waste that is collected and how it goes back into the industry, is that 40% of all waste that comes out from your home is lying somewhere on a landfill, right? So that's a huge amount. So 40% of all plastic waste that's come out from your home is lying in a landfill. Okay, and similarly, you have the other kinds of waste, which is close to about I think 32%, which is getting incinerated. So they are burning that. So that's causing the harmful gases to go into air, and that's where we're facing a lot of health problems. The other 14% is going back into the recycling industry. Okay. Now, what is interesting is when you talk about 14% going into the recycling industry, out of which just 2% is actually getting recycled. The 12% is actually getting downcycled. So those are the latest stats that's come out, which is very interesting to note, because that's what we are kind of dabbling with right now. That's what is the major problem right now. So what we need to also understand is that, going back to initially what we started off with, it starts with reducing our waste, refusing to use plastic. Then it starts with trying to reuse whatever that we have. Okay. Also in that, just be careful as to how do you reuse plastic, because sometimes we tend to think that I'm reusing a particular, let's say, a bottled water, and we tend to add hot water into it, which is something that you should never do. Okay, because if you add anything that's into a plastic that is made for single use, you are inviting trouble, because that's when your plastic starts reacting and starts giving out toxins that could harm you. So be careful, start reading about it. Your grades, as to what each grade defines, you'll be able to see it under each category. Let me read out some of those things that we had come out. So in case of microwave, what's generally understood is that you should not heat any food in a plastic container in a microwave. You have some microwave oven grade plastic that has come out in the market, but we would still, why do you want to try and risk it in terms of, you don't want to start risking it, right? So that's one. So also you kind of be sure that you do not burn plastic at all, okay? And just ensure that if you're eco-breaking, ensure that you keep it dry, okay? Ensure that there is no food particles in it, okay? And with that, composting and eco-breaking, with that you'd probably be able to take care of 90% of the waste.
Two quick questions. How to clean the plastic if you get in huge amounts? Second, can Tetra Packs also be plastic bricked?
Tetra Packs, we wouldn't recommend it to be plastic brick because, again, like I said, it's got like that paper that is there that'll start reacting it. I would say clean up the Tetra Pack, keep it aside, start inquiring locally, because in the cities, at least there are a few places where people have started collecting it. Okay, there are a few online tutorial videos where you can look at extracting the pulp of paper from Tetra Pak using a blender, okay, and then doing a paper mache exercise, setting the metal aside. So no Tetra Pak inside the Ecobrick.
Second was, if you get plastic in huge amounts, how do you clean it, especially us?
So when we get plastic in huge amount, that's a good question, because that's what we've been kind of dabbling with the last couple of weeks here, where we've got hundreds and hundreds of sacks of plastic. So what we do is we take it under a tin sheet, we dry it in the sun, we wait for, like, let's say the dust and other particles to fall off, and then once it becomes dry, it becomes easier for us to kind of dust it out. And if we have to clean it, we just clean it in running water, ensuring that there is no microplastic that's going into it, dry it in the sun, and then that's when we start eco-breaking it. So probably the last question, sort of. So then, because I think like last time, we'll just kind of end up
the medicinal waste or like the plastic stuff which comes with the medicines, can that be stuffed or not?
Again, so if you look at medicine, you'll just have to look at what it's packaged with. So usually, if it's coming in plastic, you can eco-break it. But if there is some remnants of medicine, you could probably just keep it under the biohazard waste, because you might have some amount of medicine that is there. So keep it under the biohazard waste in a different category in your home.
One last one. What can be done with the plastic that is hard? How to recycle it?
Call up your kabadiwala. So that usually is your HDP, or high density polyethylene plastic. So call up your kabadiwala. Just kind of keep it aside till someone comes and collects it, because as long as you keep it aside, you ensure that it gets collected. Keep it clean. Okay, thank you everyone. Thank you for joining in again, and thank you for all your love. See you guys in the next session.